Welcome to the Best of CET series by IMS. Today we'll be solving some more critical reasoning questions. Take a look at the first question now and see if you can solve it on your own.
If you like our content and want to experience the IMS pedagogy, you can join the IMS Zero Fee Prep programs that will give you access to concept videos, sectionals, full-length tests and more for free. You may click on the I button or on the link in the description box below to access the same. Happy learning!
As you can see, this involves weakening the conclusion. But in order to weaken the conclusion, we need to know what the conclusion is in the first place. It's a fairly simple argument. It's attributing the shortage of new teachers to some specific factors, such as working conditions and salaries. So how would we weaken it? One of the things that you should try to do when solving critical reasoning questions is to come up with a shadow answer. In this case, the shadow answer is very simple. If we want to weaken the argument that X is caused by Y, maybe we need to suggest that X is not caused by Y, it's caused by some other factors. In this case, shortage of new teachers is caused by something else besides working conditions and salaries. Now let's evaluate our options and see if something matches our shadow answer. If we are lucky, it will. If we are not, we'll see what to do. The first option here says, many existing teachers would not be hired under the current hiring standards. This seems to suggest that the hiring standards have changed. So, people who are employed right now may not be hired if they were reapplying. But this is not really relevant to what we are trying to do because it talks about existing teachers. It does not talk about the shortage of new teachers. So, this is neither strengthening nor weakening. It is simply irrelevant. We would eliminate this and take a look at the next option. This one says that teachers are entering teaching with higher educational levels, which is fine and welcome. But again, it is irrelevant to the task at hand. It does not talk about why there would be a shortage of new teachers. So, let's evaluate the third option. Some current teachers have cited lower salaries for hiring as a reason for the staffing shortage. If anything, this would support the conclusion and not weaken it. Definitely to be eliminated, let's look at the fourth option. Many renowned teachers have cited low pay and lack of professional freedom as reasons for leaving the profession. Again, this seems to support the conclusion rather than oppose it. So, let's look at our last option. This says that many aspiring teachers, which is equal to teachers who are yet to enter the profession, have cited new hiring standards as a reason instead of the pay or working condition. This is exactly what our shadow answer said, that there is some other reason for the shortage instead of the salary or working conditions. So we can be fairly certain that E is our answer. On the whole, this is a very easy question because the answer is straightforward. Let's take a look at another one now. Now here you can see that we are looking at strengthening the conclusion. So please read the question and see if you can solve it on your own. Let's take a look at how we would go about solving this. In this question, the shadow answer is a little difficult to arrive at. So let's evaluate our options straight away. The argument is fairly short and simple. It talks about helmets reducing severe injury for bikers. Anything that suggests that this is true will be our answer. The first option says that 96% of the bikers wearing helmets have survived even fatal accidents. This seems to support the idea that the helmet would avoid injury to some extent. So A is something we should retain. It does support our conclusion. B says that a study in Delhi showed that the number of bikes on road reduced when wearing the helmet was made compulsory. First of all, this does not really talk about whether helmets reduced injury or not. So it is simply irrelevant to the question. All that it really says is that perhaps people didn't like the rule and therefore fewer people chose to ride bikes. But that does not really matter because we are trying to support the conclusion given in this question. So B is irrelevant and should be eliminated. The next one says, cheap quality helmets do not provide any protection. If anything, this seems to weaken the argument rather than strengthen it. So we should eliminate it right away. The next one says, majority of the accidents involving bikers were not because of the fault of the bikers. We're not really concerned with whose fault it is. All that we're really concerned about is whether the helmets protect against injury or not. But D does not really relate to that in any way. So D is also irrelevant and should be eliminated. The last option says, the roads are full of potholes and are uneven, making them unsafe for any kind of vehicle. This simply talks about the condition of the roads, but as you can see, it doesn't mention anything about helmets or whether they protect you against injury. So the fifth option is also irrelevant. Again, a fairly easy question to solve. None of the options relate to the question at hand, which is whether helmets protect one against injury or not. So A would have to be our answer. We have a few more questions to go. Let's take a look at the next one. As usual, try to read this and solve it on your own. This one is a double whammy because it is an assumption question and the text is also a little difficult to understand. But give it your best shot. Let's get started. First of all, whenever there's an assumption question, you need to know what the conclusion is. The assumption is a belief that is essential for the truth of the conclusion. In other words, we're asking ourselves, what must the author believe in order to make the statement or the point he or she is making? So we need to identify the conclusion first. In this case, the conclusion is simply the last line. But I do have the ability to provide a little more love, pleasure, and happiness. What is the author really saying? The author is saying that I may not be able to change everything, but I think I can change a few more things for the better. What must the author believe in order to make this statement? Let's take a look at the first option. An individual cannot change the world, for it is a... Let's take a look at the first option. An individual cannot change the world, for it is like a drop in the ocean. This is a fairly pessimistic statement. If the author believed that an individual cannot change the world at all and that individual efforts do not matter, then the author would not make the last statement. The author believes that an individual can make some difference. So A is definitely not the assumption that the author is making. B says every individual should strive to improve oneself, which might be fine on its own, but the argument is not about improving oneself. The argument is about trying to make the world a little better. So B does not relate to our conclusion and therefore cannot be the answer. C says unhappiness is the root cause of all evil. Maybe, but the question does not really talk about evil. And it seems a little too extreme to say unhappiness is the root cause of all evil. So we would eliminate the third option for two reasons. One, the author does not talk about evil versus good in that manner. Also because it's an extreme option which says that something is the cause of all evil. So C is definitely not our answer. D says every individual has the capability to make things better, even with the help of small gestures. This seems fairly close to what the author is saying in the conclusion. But I do have the ability to provide a little more love and happiness. So individuals can make some difference. So we should retain D because nothing else has seemed promising so far. The last option says none of the above. Now, had we not found anything relevant to our conclusion, we would probably have said none of the above. But in this case, D seems like a fairly promising option. And so we should eliminate E and choose D. We have one more question to go. It's very different from all the ones we have solved so far. Take a look at it now and see if you can solve it on your own. As you can see, this is a slightly different question. It says the apparent discrepancy in the above statement can be explained by any of the following facts except. This is an except or a not question. It is also asking you which one will not explain the contradiction provided in the question. So let's first understand what is the contrast or the contradiction. The question says that government expenditure on education has increased, but the proportion of uneducated people has not decreased. Despite spending more, the percentage of uneducated people has remained the same. We have to pick an option that will not explain why this would be true. Let's now see how we would solve this question. The first option here says, inflation in the country has affected education severely, as expense on education has risen without improvement in quality. This would explain why the percentage of uneducated has not reduced. More money had to be spent due to inflation, but that has not really produced any difference in results. It has not really shown any improvement in quality of education. So, the extra money has kind of gone to waste in the sense that we've not been able to reach out to more people or provide better education. A would explain the discrepancy and therefore cannot be our answer, so we eliminate it. B says that a great proportion of the expenditure was allocated to something very specific. New science projects conducted in a few schools. So all that money was diverted to a very specific purpose. As a result, it could not be used to reach out to more people. B would again explain why the percentage of uneducated people has remained the same, because the money reached only a few schools and was spent on only a few projects. So B can be eliminated. C says the increased expenditure was spent on providing higher education for older students. Again, it was spent on a good cause, but on higher education. That again would explain why the percentage of uneducated has remained the same. The uneducated would be people who have not received any education. So if the money is being spent on higher education, that automatically means that there is less money available for primary or basic education. C again would explain the entire discrepancy, so cannot be our answer. D says a large part of the expenditure was spent on enhancing facilities in existing schools. Now this is something we should think about. If the facilities in existing schools are enhanced, maybe it would allow the schools to reach out to more people or more students. D should cause some doubt in your mind, so we should retain D. E says that the increase in expenditure was spent on providing text to the students for free. Again, in this case, we are distributing books to existing students, which might again explain why we are not really reducing the number of uneducated. So E cannot be our answer. Even if we are doubtful about D, through the process of elimination, we should be able to arrive at D as our answer. Some questions in critical reasoning are easy to solve, and others like this one might take time. In the exam, make sure that you're not wasting time on difficult questions and only solve the ones that you can solve quickly.